So welcome and thank you again for making time. We've really only got one thing on the agenda today, so at the risk of jinxing it, I do think it'll be a short meeting, but we will see. So yeah, welcome. And Stoyan, do you mind, Stoyan or Ray, do one of you mind going through the committee roster and calling roll?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Andrew is here.
Yep.
Charles Calvano, he had a conflict. Sue Kaufman. I think I saw Sue.
Yeah, I'm here.
Sue? Okay, thank you. Sean.
Good morning.
Morning. Damon.
I'm here.
Corey Thomas.
I am here.
Todd.
Here.
Rob Grepper. Chris Seaman.
I'm here.
Al Spalding.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Morning. Michael Bart. Mike? No? Okay. Will Rodriguez. Okay, we have quorum.
You want me to go through the fire tag since we invited them too as well, Stoyan?
Yes, please. Yeah, I forgot the fire tag.
Okay. Meg Haley. Quinn Tai. Corey, I seen you were here. So
Yep.
Damon, I see you were here. John Napier. Michael Six. Ken Brulette. Dave Pocott. Matthew Campbell.
He just logged on.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
Matthew, you there?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am.
Kevin Marr. Zach Tuck. Tony Doan.
Here.
I see. Again, Chris, I got you on already too. Okay, we're good.
All right, thank you. I don't know if we've got any guests or not, but if we do and you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to.
Yep, Marty Probst, Boeing permits.
Thank you. All righty, so let's take a look at the agenda. Does anyone have any comments or changes they'd like to make? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Chris. I'll move to approve the agenda as shown.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? And motion passes. Next up are the minutes, which we've got up here. So take a look through, see if you've got any revisions you'd like to make. And if not, you know, we'll take a motion.
This is Al. I'd like to motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Al.
This is Sue. I'll second that.
Thank you, Sue. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? And the motion passes. So, all right, on to business then. we will pull up the question here for our opinion.
Let's
And-
start, Andrew. Sorry to cut you off. Let's start with the schedule first. I want to spend a 3 minutes talking about the schedule for
Of course.
the upcoming meetings. We agree that we'll have the meetings every other week on Wednesdays. The question, some meetings may take longer. It depends how many proposals, code proposals we have to discuss for that particular moment. But I wanted to check with the TAG members when to start the meetings, and the folks from the FAR TAG are here, and we briefly exchanged a few messages with Ray this morning. So Shell wanted for the energy code to have the code proposals in advance, and the TAG members will discuss the code proposals in advance without making any decision. Saying in advance, the first council meeting that the council will refer proposals to TAGs will be on May 17th, and the second one is June 17th, and the time frame for statewide code proposals is April 1st, May 31st. So we'll have some proposals officially referred from the council on May 17th, and the rest of it on June 17th. So before May 17th, I assume we will have some proposals, and we already have one for the building code. So if the TAG and the TAG chair, if you folks want to talk about these proposals again in advance, we can schedule meetings before May 17th. If you don't, then we can start with the meetings that will discuss the code proposals after May 17th. So this is what I wanted to double check with you.
All right, any questions? All
I
right,
like
well,
the
thank you,
idea of
Steve.
meeting before.
What was that, Chris?
Oh, I like the idea of meeting before they officially pass us the stuff, just so that we can kind of get an idea of what's coming. And then when we have a discussion, when the council passes it to us, we'll have a more informed discussion and probably be able to more readily make an actual decision on what we should advise them to do.
Yep. Give me just 1 second, my phone's ringing in the background.
The risk here is that some proposals may be discussed in advance, and if the council decides not to refer these proposals to the TAG, then it's kind of wasted time on one side, but on the other side, the TAG members will have some idea again what is coming, even if the proposal is not approved by the council. So I don't have a personal preference. It depends of the TAG members what you folks want to do.
Yep. So
I have a quick question with, so we're meeting, was it every other Wednesday? And are we gonna alternate tags? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
The plan is 1 week we'll have IBC TAG, and the next week we'll have the fire code TAG, and again 1 week IBC, 1 week the fire code. So for each TAG will be every other week.
All right, thank you.
You know, Chris, this is Al. I have maybe a suggestion. If in fact the council has the ability to decide whether or not to refer the proposals to the TAG, and I agree with Stoyan, that might not be the best use of time if we review those in advance. Would there be an ability as a kind of an alternate suggestion for the TAG members to receive like an email of what the proposed proposals are in, or maybe they would be listed somewhere on the internet that we could look at those. Because even what I'm suggesting is even if the council doesn't refer a proposal to us as a TAG member, we may have a specific interest in commenting on that individually, or even as a group, which I think we could do, almost whether or not they were referred to us or not. And I think what Chris is really saying is we'd like to know what's coming down the pike, but maybe we don't need to meet on it. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I totally like that.
All right, I like that as well.
Can
I don't know why the council wouldn't refer things to the appropriate tags, but yeah, I guess theoretically they may not.
Okay, I'll just speak on that just a little bit. We talked about it kind of in our staff meeting, and Stoyan, correct me if I say anything that's out of place, but we can, I guess for a compromise, maybe we have a link on our website and we update it once a week that have the proposals that are coming in. But the only problem I see is as we know from past experience, that the last day they're allowed to submit is the day we get 100, not one day. But we can work on some sort of compromise like that as a link to the website.
We discussed it a little bit last week, and we're meeting tomorrow, the staff, and we can go over it, what we can do with the posting. So we don't want to overload the website, but at the same time, we want to give you an access to the upcoming proposals. So we'll make the decision this week, and we'll let you know. I will send an email to everybody, and I guess Ray can do the same with the fire tag.
All right, that sounds like a good path forward. Any additional comments?
Just out of curiosity, what's standard operating procedure for the proposal process? Is this kind of a change from how we typically do it?
No, there is no change. Typically, the proposals, the staff receives the proposals, and the proposals go to the council, and the council decides which proposal will go forward in a summary. And then the proposals that were referred by the council are going to the different tags, the building, the fire, and the energy tag. It's a standard procedure. The question was if the tag members would like to take a look at the proposals before they go to the council, but in this case, the tag cannot make any decisions on it. So I would consider this a standard procedure. Nothing is new.
Okay, thank you.
And what other questions? I learned that I was reading, you shouldn't ask, are there any questions? You say, now what are the questions? And that's supposed to allow people to speak more freely, but maybe you should do that in the beginning. I guess at the end, everyone's asked their questions. Yeah, we'll wait a couple more seconds if anyone does have any questions or they're not quite clear on the path forward before we move along. All right, well, hey, let's get down to business then on re-looking at the clarification on this question here. So I guess to summarize, a lot of folks in the council weren't quite comfortable with this, and if I remember correctly, the reason was because it seems to have the caveat in there for buildings or facilities not licensed by the state of Washington. And, even facilities licensed, the code official still has ultimate authority. Is that everyone else's interpretation of what came out of the full council meeting?
Yeah, Chair, this is Tony Doan, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other things that I think came into question here that I think it was Micah was uncomfortable with at the time is the portion that says the code official may designate the occupancy type, and he thought that maybe was a little strongly worded. One thing that I'll say before the group dives in is that the fire tag went through this extensively for about, we probably spent a couple hours on this. And part of the language and how it ended up and the reason it ended up that way is because of the Department of Health's involvement in this and their concern with the wording. And so Matthew Campbell's here today. And so I would like to see some of his input, because what I don't want to get away from is I don't want to get away from all of the concerns that the Department of Health has with the with those occupancies where it does involve their input. So that's just a little more background on it. So from there, I'll let everyone else kind of, you know.
He was also concerned that there was this when this question was first presented to the, excuse me, this is right. When this question was first presented to the fire tag, we looked at it and we asked for clarification, and they modified their question to the what question that you see now. And another concern was 302.1. Micah had a concern that didn't meet nothing in that give the authority for the code official to make the designation or the occupancy classification. So the 302.1 may have been left in there because of the first question, but may need to be struck now.
There was a discussion before the official version of this opinion. Ray and I talked about referring to chapter 1. There is a section in chapter 1 that gives the building officials, the code officials, the authority. However, chapter 1 is not equally adopted, if I can use this term, by all jurisdictions, and it's always amended by the local jurisdictions. So yes, there are some, there is a section with giving the building officials the authority, but at the same time, we don't control how the local building departments are adopting, amending, and enforcing this section.
Yeah, agreed. I was hoping, and I was hoping for a proposal from Micah on this, since he was the one who had the strong input on this and the concern over it. But it doesn't look like we got that, or do we have a proposal from anyone as far as changing this answer?
No.
I was thinking about wording, and maybe other folks were too. But Matthew, did you want to say anything since your name was brought up before we get into discussion to, set the narrative?
Thank you, Andrew. Matthew Campbell with the Department of Health. Micah did bring up the challenges with the question and the answer as far as administrative authority and whether or not the statement, the response, could be read as a phrase that I used as with adverse interpretation regarding the administration of the code, where the language that's presented now was merely, I presented a response based on the Department of Health's interest that where we do designate or link an occupancy designation to a licensed facility, that any interpretation or our opinion that we would offer wouldn't undermine those provisions in the building code in chapter 3. So I think there's probably some room for improvement on the language to ensure that it speaks more specifically, but I'm not sure where to go with it, because every time we add a word, it kind of opens up an additional opportunity for someone to look at it from a different perspective and have it have a negative or an unintended consequence. So.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. you know, what my thinking was is just turn it around. So we start with the second part after the comma first, saying the code official, the code official is either is authorized or has the responsibility for designating the occupancy type and construction requirements, you know, in accordance with state law when, you know, in accordance with state law, and then, you know, reference the licensed facilities by the state of Washington, something like that. But if this was discussed for 2+ hours in the fire tag, Tony, maybe you can, you know, shed some light if that was discussed, or and if so, what issues there were, and, you know, what your thoughts were. But anyone feel free to speak up now. We're in open discussion.
Can we, Andrew, this is Ray. The end that it did get brought up in the fire tag about chapter 1, but how they locally administer it. Could we add some sort of verbiage of putting chapter 1 in the answer, as far as chapter 1 designates the classification or by the adoption of local jurisdiction code? That's just throwing words out there, but that we still cover that however they adopt and administer chapter 1. The building code specifies how to do it, but the local jurisdiction also has the, however their authority goes, would designate the classification.
Yeah, well, you know, the way that the code is written, the code official is the AHJ. So if the jurisdiction states that somebody else designates an occupancy type or certain requirements, then they would be the code official as far as the nomenclature goes in the code, from my perspective. Therefore, you know, I think it's cleanest just to say the code official is responsible for designating the occupancy type. And that, you know, and then follow up with the responsibility includes abiding by state law when it requires that the, you know, that the occupancy type or construction requirements be designated by the Department of Health.
Well, I think we have this is Al, I think we potentially have an unintended consequence, like Matthew is indicating. If we were to identify it specifically by those facilities licensed by the Department of Health, we love that, of course. But it's more encompassing than that. It's licensed facilities by DSHS. And then the other thing I'm concerned about is that there are other types of licensed facilities. For instance, DCYF, Department of Children, Youth and Families, or something like that. They license daycares. This would imply that the code official wouldn't be able to, because they're licensed by the state of Washington, and there potentially are others that aren't DOH or DSHS. This is a pretty broad statement, and I get what the Department of Health was trying to do and say, and DSHS, I'm going to speak for DSHS in this case because I don't see them on board. But we very specifically, for a consistent approach across the state, have routinely and typically, historically, whatever, called out certain licensed healthcare facilities by amendment to be a specific occupancy type, but not all licensed facilities in the state of Washington are called out by amendment. So this might have that unintended consequence potentially as worded in the answer now. We wouldn't necessarily, without input from DCYF or any other agency that licenses facilities, and I don't have a long list of those, but I do have at least the one example of daycares, that would preclude the code official from designating that. And I don't think that we do by amendment specify the occupancy type for daycares. So it would kind of paint the code official in a little bit of a corner when maybe that's not the total desire here.
I hop on again and share? Would it be valuable to go back and identify a distinction between this question as viewed from a building code and fire code, as in terms of a planning, design, and construction discussion versus a survey application? Because I'm not sure that even a good answer from the building code side as a building official plan reviewer, a good answer there may also mean that a surveyor could go in after that plan reviewer and building official and redesignate an occupancy. So that would be the first part, is whether or not this needs to be broken out into a IBC planning, design, and construction conversation versus a fire code official doing a survey after construction is completed question. And then the next part would be is this question, regardless of how it's presented, a question about whether or not the code official can identify building requirements based on use versus designation of occupancy, which then leads to building requirements. So the difference would be is if I walk into a building and I see that it's being used in a certain way, I might look for certain specific building characteristics. And if there's a difference between the occupancy and what I was seeing, then there a change of use of this has been taken place, and that should have been reviewed, and that should have been addressed at that point in time. So as a survey, coming at it from a survey perspective, I may not need to care about the occupancy designation. If I see an activity in that space, I can look to the provisions of the building code to describe how that space should be constructed and not have to get into the administrative component of who designates it as that occupancy. Because I think in this case, the designation of the occupancy has become an unfortunate administrative hurdle to getting to just basically reaffirming the authorities of the code official. So, sorry for that, a little bit lengthy there, but.
Thank you, Matthew.
From the fire marshal standpoint, and I was involved in the discussion very briefly on this one, as I recall, there was a couple things that are associated with this, and I thought we had a simple answer that, for the certificate of occupancy, the building official has the authority to determine the occupancy, period. That's basically what it should be. But from our standpoint, we have a little bit of a challenge with it as well. So I'm going to throw a little wrench in here as well. H occupancies are actually determined under the fire code. So the building official can determine it's an H occupancy, but the particular type of occupancy is determined under the fire code. So we're doing a whole lot of things in here that could create some challenges on historically what has been done, the interpretations that have been made previously. It's kind of an odd questions because they do say associated hazards of the facility. So if we have an H occupancy in there, we have to take a look at from the fire code to make sure it meets our requirements and designate which one it is. So this answer is incomplete, and I'm not really excited about how it's worded. As in general, it's always been the case that the building official has the authority to make the decision of what occupancy will be stated on the certificate of occupancy, with coordination with the fire department for H occupancies. That's what I think it should be. My statement to other jurisdictions that are modifying the process, they can modify the WAC, but they can't be any less restrictive. So there has to be some kind of building official or code official that has the authority of the building official. And I'm saying that only because City of Spokane has not had a building official for 9 years. And we're currently in the process of correcting that, but that has been a real challenge with us. So the word code official has been used more than it has building official. So just giving just general background from the fire marshal standpoint.
Thank you, Dave. So I'm not quite sure. So code official, then you're saying does not work. That's not general enough to mean fire code official or building code official.
Well, because the question is, does the building official And so by saying the code official, are we, that we're not really clarifying what code official is versus the question says building official?
So if I may, this is Tony. If we started at the comma, like Andrew was saying, and we took the sentence, the code official may designate the occupancy type and construction requirements for the building, but added in there that it's the building code official, unless it's an H occupancy, then it would be the fire code official may designate the occupancy type, yada, yada, and finish that sentence out that way with more specifics in it. I think that would be a little more pointed in order to answer the question and address when the fire code official would come in. And then if a jurisdiction such as Mr. Kokot has just explained, if they have a jurisdiction where you don't end up with a building official for 9 years, 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, and so someone else is doing that duty or performing that duty, I think it's fair to, obviously, whoever that person is that is performing that duty, hopefully there's something in that jurisdiction's municipal code or ordinance that explains who has that, in which case that would solve the issue of not specifically listing the exact person in here. If we just took that sentence and we explained the building code and fire code duties, I don't think, and I could be wrong here, I don't think anyone would disagree with that sentence. The issue would then be, do we need to add another sentence that is just a broad term that says, this does not speak to any state licensing agency duties, spelled out in the state code or the state law. Does that get us in the right direction? I may not.
Why don't we get a Word document up there and start putting it out there, and we can massage the language.
Okay.
How about that?
Shannon, are you on the Word document?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So what I'm thinking is putting the building code official and maybe Dave, starting with, yeah, there we go. And that's maybe the start of our sentence. And maybe Dave can help with this. The building code official may designate the occupancy type and construction. And then I don't know, a comma or semicolon after construction, and then we'll jump into the fire code official. Is that what we want to do, Dave?
That works.
Okay.
We want to make sure we strike the
Semicolon.
first, we do want to strike the first part there from the 4 buildings or facilities not licensed in Washington. We want to strike that.
Thank you, Dave. And let's see.
And I was kind of thinking is that you've got like the building code official may designate the occupancy. I'm going to say shall rather than may. Shall designate the occupancy type and construction requirements for the building, structure, or portion thereof, with the exception of H occupancies, which are determined by the fire code official.
So this is Matt. On behalf of Micah, technically speaking, does the code assign the authority to designate the occupancy type, or is it the applicant to present the
yeah, you're right, Matt. That is one of the issues that Micah had, because when you look at the duties and powers of the building official, it talks about having the authority to render interpretations of the code. And any interpretations, policies, and procedures shall be in compliance with the intent and purpose of the code. But it doesn't specifically say under duties and power that shall designate the occupancy. Personally, I think this happens all the time at jurisdictions, and I don't have an issue with it personally, but based on the wording, I know Micah had an issue with saying the building code official may or even shall designate the occupancy type. I personally don't have an issue with it, but I know that was one of the issues Micah brought up.
In fact, I could see this being read as an amendment to 104.1.
Yeah,
To
the issue that I
granting of
have
power.
is the authority of issuing the certificate of occupancy has to be approved by the building code official. So that's where I feel that the authority is given to the building code official. Is further back in chapter 1, talking about the certificate of occupancy, that gives the building code official that authority.
So what's the adverse, scan our minds here. What's the adverse implication of granting a greater authority to the code official to designate your occupant? I guess, would this permit a fire marshal on a fire code official on a survey to redesignate the occupancy of my building?
Well, the H occupancies, the way they're written into the code, even the description of them refer to the fire code for the requirements for them. So basically, the determination of H occupancies is the fire code official.
Okay.
Dave, I don't know if I fully agree with that statement. Those sections that talk about group H stuff do have the F bracketed item in front of it, which just means that the fire group is the one that kind of talks about it and gets it into the code. Similarly, when we have it in chapter 10 for the B, when it's the building code talking about it, I still think that the building code gives the authority to the building official to make a determination of group H. All of the information is there in chapter 4 and chapter 3 to do that. Not all of the information of how to comply as an H is in the building code, and you have to go to the fire code for that. But I think it's well within the building code official's authority to call something an H, whatever it is, as appropriate.
Yeah, this is Sue. I was about to pop in as well, and I completely agree with Chris that the building official determines the occupancy. An H occupancy is in the building code. It's in the IBC, so I get to determine as the building official whether it's an H occupancy. But there, again, are requirements that are also in the fire code that help. That are determined, that makes some determinations with relative to requirements for an H occupancy. So, I mean, the building code official can designate the occupancy type and construction requirements per the IBC and the IFC, so.
Yeah, this is Damon. I also agree with Sue and Chris on that. And I felt that code official was a pretty good catch-all for the variety of duties that kind of incorporate into the codes. And also, I guess my biggest issue is more so with the construction requirements portion of the answer. And I felt like that kind of broadened the scope and that it should be removed to kind of narrow it only to occupancy classification, because that's really what this question or opinion is about.
I do have an issue with the H occupancy. The building official can definitely determine an H occupancy, but they can't determine which type. Within the building code, it refers to the fire code. The fire code official has that authority to be able to determine which H occupancy it is. That might not be the same practice in every jurisdiction, but that is a practice that I have seen in most every jurisdiction I've been, is the building official will defer to the fire code official for the designation of the H occupancy type.
Yeah, I agree there, Dave, that they do defer to us, but I think the authority lies with the building official, and then they say, I don't really know this stuff as well as you, so can you tell me what it is? Does that make sense?
Then I would feel acceptable to a modification that where it says with the exception of H occupancies, which will be coordinated with the fire code official.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Dave. I think in reality, yes, you're absolutely right that a building official, there's no building official in the state that's really competent enough and feels comfortable enough with H occupancies to do it themselves, and they always ask
Right.
for support
And
there.
this language would address that enough that I want to make sure that there is an interface there so that they can go back and look at it without making a designation. They call it an H3 and it's an H1. That becomes a huge problem for stuff later on.
I just want to make add a comment, which, you know, may be coordinated with a fire official. I mean, some jurisdictions, you know, the building official is the fire official I mean, they're very small, or, you know, so I don't know if you need to say will be, or, you know, I mean, it you know, may be, and that's in order to, you know, be coordinated with the fire code official to, you know, ensure compliance with the fire code or something, the international fire code, something like that.
Yeah,
You know,
I like that. That's fine.
For
I
compliance
don't
with
mind
the
that.
fire code requirements, something like that.
Yeah, that works. And I think there was a comment about the construction requirements. I do think that needs to be stricken because if we're only just talking about the questions, just talking about the occupancy type, I think we need to remove the construction requirements just because we're answering the question.
And requirements.
Yeah.
And then what after fire code official?
For compliance with the international fire code.
Okay,
Do we need to change the section numbers up top? What we're referencing?
Here.
Yeah. I was just wondering if wherever we're pulling this verbiage from, whatever section, we should probably list it on the top of the, or we can just say
So that'd be
IBC.
307.1, referring to the age occupancies. And 302.1. Well, 302.1 is just occupancy classification. So that one I think is applicable. I don't know if we need to add in 307.1.
what about 104.1?
Oh, that we do want to have that one in, yes.
So this is Al. I like the modifications that are being suggested here, but I do remember seeing the original question, and it was very specific to, the question was really, wasn't it related to institutional occupancies? Now,
Yes.
so the challenge I have is now the question's been modified, which I appreciate. They're trying to clarify. It says non-medical licensed institution. So we're really not talking about institutional. We may or may not be talking about, the question may not be actually focused on institutional occupancies that fall within the institutional classification. And we're really getting away from, although we can, I'm sure, Matt, we can suggest some language, but the thing that the Department of Health, DSHS, and likely other state facilities wanted to, our concern was that if there's a state amendment on the books that specifically calls out a Washington state licensed facility, because if you say non-medical, I mean, that immediately someone can start to argue that, oh, that's because we do have currently a amendment on the books for licensed assisted living facilities. We call out their occupancy type as an I1C2, but there could be, now it could be subjective about, well, that's not a medical facility or institution. So it's getting muddy for me a little bit here.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick, Al, and this is for Al and Matt, because I think the whole idea here was is this was our starting sentence, but I don't think we're done here.
Mm.
I think
Okay.
now we need to separate it out with another sentence that talks about and specifically what the concerns are on the licensing side of things. I think that's our next step. But I just wanted to get this out of the way and try and separate the two without the commas. That way they were separate. And so maybe now we can add that as it talks about licensing.
Thank you, Tony.
May I share some, is it appropriate? Can I share the context of the question, the original question?
Please.
So this was brought to the council on behalf of the association, or by the King County Fire Marshals, because a jurisdiction on survey of an existing hotel that had been purchased and repurposed, the surveyors believed institutional healthcare services to be provided on certain floors of the building, and wanted the ability to say, we are designating you an I2 occupancy. Thou shalt have smoke barriers, sprinklers, et cetera, et cetera. Any it was an effort to apply construction requirements based on a designation of occupancy, based on interpretation of use in the field through a site survey. So the question came back is, do we have the power to tell them they are an institutional occupancy, so that we can tell them so that we can ensure the building responds as the building code requires for institutional occupancies? So we wanted to, the Department of Health reached out to speak with them to try and narrow the scope of the question, because it is an awkward administrative application of the code question that's being kind of spiraling into a recitation of the fundamentals of the administration of the code. I mean, the more we write, the more caveats we're going to have to cut out. And they're all good ones. I don't mean to, we're literally rewriting the administrative portion of the application of the code to try and answer a question that really probably is just challengingly presented. Because you'll find the longer we go, the more little details and more subtle nuances we're going to have, and we'll be rewriting the sections of 301 and the administrative chapter, and it's just going to open it up, and Mike is going to come back next week and say that that authority is not designated or granted you in the code, and then we're going to do it again.
Hey, Matthew, this is
Sorry.
Sue.
It's a lot of stuff there.
I have a comment. I mean, if somebody is operating a building outside the authority of the certificate of occupancy, I mean, they're issued a certificate of occupancy, and if they are using the occupancy out of compliance with their approved occupancy and conditions of the approved plan, the approved permit for them that they, were granted approval from the building official, then that's an enforcement issue. So we would go in and say, I'm enforcing because you're out of compliance with your certificate of occupancy. And, you need to come in and resolve your non-compliance issue and redesignate the occupancy to be in compliance, or show me that you do meet the requirements of this. Because if you're actually using the building out of compliance with the approved occupancy and uses prescribed per the certificate of occupancy that was issued, then again, it's a compliance issue.
You're spot on, Sue. I couldn't agree with you more. I think you made my one of my thoughts even better.
This is Don. Can I put 111 certificate of occupancy? It will help a little bit when we talk about the certificate of occupancy, or you have the books with you and you can. I think it answers. I agree with you. It answers at least half of the question, if not.
Can I go back to Sue's point that she nailed it insofar as this question would appear to defer to the code official to identify when someone is providing a licensed healthcare practice. That is the jurisdiction of the Department of Health or the other licensing agency. Because the fire code official is not appropriate to go into a space and identify whether or not they are receiving casual outpatient cognitive behavioral therapy or outpatient treatments or receiving care that is required to be licensed by Washington State and designate them as that occupancy. So it's a little bit of a different conversation whether or not the building construction standards, this question would seek to decide whether the code official gets to decide when you are an assisted living facility versus in an apartment complex with home care provided to people that don't get out much. Or a hospital or a psych hospital, even though you're technically a residential treatment facility of some sort. Because if I rent out a building, a hotel, I'm using it as an R2, I'm doing outpatient alcohol treatment there, it's just talk therapy, a fire code official could come in and say, you are now officially an RTF and you shall meet the requirements of an I-1 condition 2 occupancy per the building code by my designation. So this is a kind of entirely different conversation about whether or not the H occupancy is determined by the fire code official versus the building official. It's much more to that administrative part. So I don't have any issues with the points that that Dave and Chris and Sue are making. I'm not sure that the answer that we're providing is going to address one. It's going to rewrite the code and offer opportunities for other clever people to poke holes in it, and it also probably won't answer their question.
This is Mike Barth. Can I make a comment? I strongly agree with Sue's analysis and Matthew. The question really being asked is, does the building official have the authority to determine occupancy classification? The answer really is simply yes. The building code puts that authority on the building official. Everything else in the question really is almost noise in the question, and everything in the answer trying to answer it is adding items that are just going to be problematic and essentially add criteria that does not exist in the code. So when, for the question being asked, the answer really should simply just be yes, without any further explanation, without adding any kind of additional things based on the way the question was raised.
Mike, I totally agree. Maybe the problem is they asked a question the second time that you can't answer without so much work. Can we, as a group, say, no, we're not going to answer your question, but if you ask the question, does the building code official get to determine the occupancy of a building? Yes. Can we do that?
I mean, I would think so, but
I mean, I'm thinking of like when the Supreme Court says, nah, we're not going to take this one. Like, can we do that? Is that available to us as an option? I want to be supportive.
I think we can answer it any way we want.
Okay.
We just take it as the tag here. We can answer it any way we want, take it before the council and explain the rationale on why we came up with it.
Okay.
And I think you're onto something there.
Okay, cool. Because I would write this as, for numerous reasons, that this is a problematic question that we can't answer without tripping all over ourselves. We're not going to answer the question posed, but we instead can answer this question.
Yeah.
Which is, does the building official have the authority to determine the occupancy classification of a building? Yes.
Yeah, and I really like this direction that you're suggesting, Chris. I would offer a friendly addition to the response, and that is, at the end of classification, I would suggest in accordance with the state adopted building code. Because that, for us, the State Department of Health, DSHS, DCYF, any other state agency, because we actually don't have the authority as state agencies to determine the occupancy type. What we do is work with you all, engage in the state adopted building codes to make that clear and concise and consistent across the state. So that really kind of addresses our concern, I think. I defer to Matthew if you have any additional concerns about that, but I really like because the direction you're suggesting, Chris, because I was going to say the answer would be yes, please refer to the administrative portion of the state adopted building codes or something. So, I was not to rewrite it. Again, Matt was saying, we're going to get ourselves in more trouble. The more, the more we write into this, the more it raises questions. And so I really like this in accordance with the state adopted building code, because that includes our amendments that we work hard to develop so that there is a consistent approach. And for any state agency, in addition, besides the Department of Health, DSHS, or any state agency, that they can always come to this group or the State Building Code Council and work to make sure that if it's important, that there is an occupancy classification that's designated so that there is consistency across the state. So this works a lot better for what I think the Department of Health's concerns are. What do you think, Matt?
This is Corey Thomas. Can I put in my concerns here? So what happens when the code official designates something as a certain occupancy, and then, by classifying it as that occupancy by the state codes, he's saying that this facility is required to be licensed, and then the licensing agency disagrees. Who has the final say?
I think, Corey, on whether or not it needs to be licensed, that's DOH. But if it is a facility that looks like, feels like, behaves like a group I2, but is not a licensed facility, there are many other things there that are not licensed, then it still could be identified as an I2.
Okay, and then the occupant comes back and says to the code official, they say, see, that the licensing agency says we don't need a license, so therefore we are not that occupancy.
Ah, okay. No, I like.
That's the issue.
Yep.
That's where this question started.
Okay.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. Yeah.
Takes care of though, right? The answer takes care of that, because it's saying that yes, the building code official has the answer to someone coming back with that. To me, is the answer that's typed here is yes.
Well, then that's what we need to say in our answer. That regardless of the licensing requirements, that the building or code official has the final occupancy classification.
That's really what an answer of yes is saying.
Yeah,
I'd even go so far as to say that when we add in accordance with state adopted building code, we're adding a little bit more mud again, because then the question, well, IFC is noted here as well, but occupancy really is determined by the building official, whether or not it's licensed, unlicensed.
And that should be part of our answer then.
Yeah, I agree with Michael, and I think we should just put the period at classification and let it, strike in accordance with the state adopted building code and not muddle it any further.
Yeah, and Corey, I know, I'll just say this, Corey, is I know exactly what you're saying, and I know exactly what you're saying, because in the 3+ hours of breaking this down, every time we add an extra sentence, there's an issue with it, or it just kind of muds it up a little bit, and then we start the conversation over again because of the way that's worded, or because of this sentence or the structure of this. And so I think that's why we're at this point where it's yes. I mean, that's our answer.
Yeah, when I was in a training seminar one time, they told me I could buy a car, I could buy insurance, but if I don't have a license, I can't drive that. So it's kind of like a more restrictive on, they're two totally different things in the same boat.
Yeah, I think the take home, Corey, for the Fire Marshal Association would be there are numerous items listed in 308.3 for institutional group I2, and only one of those things is licensed care facilities, right? So anything else, it doesn't have to be a licensed care facility to be an I2.
Correct.
And I think if somebody were to ask that question, we could answer that question, but that's not the question that was asked. And I think it's just the way it was asked that it trips us up so dang much.
So my understanding is we're going to delete that first paragraph that we in the answer and just say, yes, the building official has authority. Is that correct? Is that? And then, and I guess, you know, maybe a further comment. Yeah. Do we need to say, in addition, for non-compliance with the certificate of occupancy of a building, the building official has authority to enforce. I guess the building official also has the authority to enforce, you know, a non-compliance with the approved certificate of occupancy.
I think we're adding too much more if we start doing some of that. I'm very comfortable with ending the sentence and
Oh, okay.
classification. And
Okay.
just saying, yes, the building code official has the authority to determine the occupancy classification. That answers the question.
I agree. I think a period after classification and keep it simple.
Yep.
And my
We keep trying to make it a little bit harder and cover all the bases. And this is an interpretation based off of the question we had. It's basically a yes/no question. So let's give them a yes/no answer.
Oh,
So-
okay. Keep it simple.
Yes,
Kiss.
as best as possible.
And my concern would be that the building code, in fact, does in some instances identify an occupancy designation with a license type, which would, this language would appear to permit the code official to not follow the Washington State amendments to the building code, where license type is specifically linked to building use and occupancy.
That's exactly why I suggested the in accordance with the state adopted building code.
Which is
So-
part of the question, and we've already answered it yes. So we don't need to put the answer in with the question answer into the answer. The question already says in accordance.
It's
with
already
adopted code.
assumed. It's
Yeah.
already assumed that we're talking about the code as adopted by Washington.
Correct.
Gotcha. I see it. Perfect.
Simple.
So 6 meetings later.
Yeah. Well, it takes a group of people to create a good answer.
It
So-
really, and Dave, we've really, between the fire tag and the building tag, and there, everything's been good input. Everybody's had great opinion. We're just trying to, once we put this on the books, this is an opinion that people are going to use for a while.
Until they ask another question and the interpretation changes.
Yeah.
And
Been
can
there,
I
done
pose a question to Al? Are there other non-medical licensed institutions that would suffer from this interpretation? That we need to be considerate of?
Well, yes, there are, but you know, then I gave you the example of a daycare, but unless the proponents and advocates for daycare, and maybe even the regulators of daycare, come to the State Building Code Council and decide that there is an issue with consistent application and propose an amendment that gets on the books, it's not an issue, I guess. Department of Social and Health Services, Department of Health have gone to State Building Code Council, followed the process, engaged, and clearly have been able to adopt, for a consistent approach, amendments that call out specific licensed care facilities that we call about and that we have jurisdiction over as a certain type of occupancy. Now, when I say jurisdiction over, I mean jurisdiction to license, not to determine the occupancy classification. And, I think in practice, what we really find is that these are questions that are often coordinated when there's a state agency involved. In practice, that's at least the standard operating practice SOP for us here at the Department of Health. We do have occupancy classification questions with jurisdictions that maybe there's a different story. Maybe they tell us they want to be a hospital, but they tell the local building department they want to be a fireworks factory. So we have to have those coordinating conversations. So I think I'm being selfish here, Matt. I think this protects Department of Health and DSHS facilities and any other agency that has participated in the process and got state amendments put onto the, onto the state adopted codes, so that we can have consistency. If this becomes an issue, this process is available, for other agencies. I can't speak to them, and I don't know that it's an issue. So I don't feel it's appropriate for me to advocate for that.
All right, should we call the question, or is there more discussion?
I move to approve the answer as written.
Thank you, Damon. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion, further discussion?
My only concern is that if the statement needs to restate the question to the extent that if we accept that in accordance with the adopted code is implied based on the question, does the limitation of application apply to non-medical licensed institutions also inferred? That is to say, should the statement actually read, to the purpose of clarity, yes, for buildings or portions thereof that operate as non-medical licensed institution, the building official has the authority to determine occupancy classification based on use of the hazards of the facility in accordance with the adopted code.
Personally, I don't think it needs that, but go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was gonna say, maybe we could just say, yes, the building code official has the authority to determine the occupancy classification of all buildings and structures.
I would be, I think that's good. Damon, would you consider that a friendly amendment? And Michael?
I personally think it's best the way it is right now. I think anything you add to it is superfluous and can be open to mudding things up. Because really the question is, does the building official have the authority to determine the occupancy classification? Period. That's our question mark. That's really the meat of that sentence. Everything else is noise in it, and nothing else would change the answer from anything other than yes. No matter what other words you put in there, it doesn't change that answer.
Okay.
I guess that was about limiting the application of the answer specific to this question.
Well, I mean, it's limited to the adopted code anyway, simply because the State Building Code Council wouldn't comment on anything other than that. Obviously, that's what the subject is. The non-medical licensed institution is just one of 1,000 different types of classifications that could be or types of uses that would have to be classified.
One other thing, if I may, is that we still have 307.1 up above there, and with this new answer, we may not need that.
Yeah, good catch. And I don't know if it's necessary to reference the IFC either. Do you, Dave, anymore?
No, not anymore.
I guess my thought was that absent the specific, the addressing the question specifically, were I to be on the other side of it, and perhaps again from Micah's perspective, the breadth of this answer does invite debate regarding the authority and to make the determination, and whether or not that's granted in the administrative components of the code or the adopting authority versus the applicant. Whereas limiting the answer to a specific set based on the question perhaps could shield that answer from that. It probably won't shield it from all of it, but to a certain extent, identify a limitation in the application.
Matt, this is Ray, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I think we answered the question, and I think that if they want a specific clarifying question, they could submit another one along with that. We get that quite frequently.
I'd agree with that. I think because it says has the authority as opposed to has the responsibility, that we're good there. Any other comments or questions? And please feel free to keep in mind those comments when voting. You know, if you agree with anything and you think it needs more work, you know, please vote no. But I think a voice vote is probably best.
Can I have a clarification, Andrew, on the voting? Who's voting?
Yep.
Building tag, fire tag?
I don't know if the
everybody tag?
fire tag can vote. Maybe
Okay, cool.
if they can, I think they should vote as well. If not, maybe they can take their own just straw vote for the record. But I'll defer to staff.
This is an IBC tag. We just invited the IFC because we worked on it for so many weeks. I think we're okay with taking the IBCs because we still have to take it before the VFP and the council. So I think we're good. Unless the fire tag really wants to straw poll vote.
Okay, yeah. Tony, did you want a straw poll vote?
The recommendation from the council was the building code and the fire code tag meets and work on the opinion.
And I think we've met that requirement. I'm okay with us not having a straw poll vote. And if anyone from the fire tag wants to speak up at the State Building Code Council meeting, we can.
Okay.
The building just voting on it. And calling it
Perfect. Good. Okay. Any more discussion?
Hi, yeah, I might be getting into the weeds a little bit, but if this same question was posed for the fire code official, would our answer be the same?
To me, that would depend on how your jurisdiction is set up and who has that role in your jurisdiction. So maybe just depends on your jurisdiction.
My simple answer would be no.
Any other questions or comments? All right, Stoyan, do you mind going through with a vote?
Okay, Sue? Sue Kaufman?
Yes. Would you like me to put a motion forward?
I heard an emotion, but I didn't hear a second.
No, I've already made a motion. The motion on the floor is to approve the answer as written. I think.
This is Mike. I had seconded the motion.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're just voting.
We're just voting.
To approve the answer as written.
Wait.
So Sue is yes. Sean?
Yes.
Damon?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Todd? I don't.
I think he logged off.
I think he logged off, yes. Rob Graper? I think I saw Rob there.
Yeah, I'm here. Honestly, I'm not expert enough in these issues to make a good decision. I think I'll abstain.
Okay. Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Al?
Yes.
I think Mike was here. Mike?
Yes, I'm here and yes.
Okay. Anybody I've missed? No, okay, we have all yeses and one abstain.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for the lively discussion.
I think it's a great answer.
I agree. Short, sweet, to the point. Beautiful. Perfection. I believe that was the last item on our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order that anyone would like to bring up or discuss? All righty, well, let's get back to our lives then and our other virtual meetings, which I'm sure we all have tons of. So thank you again, and we will see everyone in 2 weeks. We'll see the fire folks, I guess, in 1 week, and all the building tag folks in 2 weeks. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody.